And one of my challenges was I wouldn't last very long in sex. I would last 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. When I was growing up, I was watching porn and I was kind of like quiet and I didn't want to get caught. And so I would masturbate as quickly as possible. And I was training my body, my arousal system, my nervous system to get erect and then come quickly and then be done, right?
Yeah.
We want to retrain that pattern. Not everybody has that, but we want to retrain it so we can hang out aroused for as long as we want. I can have this energetic peak of pleasure that does not have to have anything to do with my cock rhythmically pumping and ejecting fluid. Once I get the energetic peak, I can have those again and again and again. The same way, similar to how women's arousal can work, where women can have orgasm after orgasm. Men, we can learn this too. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
A scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is no arousal and 10 is peak orgasm. We want to find 5 to 7 on the arousal range. So 5 is high enough that you're not going to slip into not being aroused anymore. 7 is far enough below the top that there's a safe buffer in case there's a wave and you don't spill over. Slowly, I started to feel energy in my body and it was like, whoa, this is a real thing. In my book, I lay out 5 steps to orgasmic mastery. And the first step is one of the benefits for men when you get this is you have more focus and energy. But also the sex levels up in ways that I could not have comprehended.
Hey, Matt, welcome to the Libido Lounge. I'm so excited you are here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about how you got into the world of supporting the masculine and helping men with non-ejaculatory orgasms.
Awesome, Diane. Thanks so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here. I coach men around sexuality and I do a lot of work around masculinity. It's one of the big passions in my life. I'm also trained as a somatic therapist, so I bring like more of a trauma-informed and attachment-informed approach to this method. For me personally, learning non-ejaculatory orgasms was A, one of the most challenging things I've ever done, and B, one of the most rewarding things. It completely changed my life, not just in terms of having better sex, but how I showed up as a man. And so I'm super passionate about sharing these practices and helping other men, supporting other men to make the same journey, because it's a big one.
This is huge. This is so huge, everybody. We are going to have, I think, one of the most deep discussions on this show around men that we have had to date, because it's a common thing, right? When I think when I have mentioned this to men, this conversation around non-ejaculatory orgasms, I think a lot of men, for one, are like, I can even do that? Like, that's even possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk about a lot of things today. We're going to talk about techniques. We're going to talk about your story. We're going to talk about what even is a non-ejaculatory orgasm. Like, how does that even feel? Is it the same thing as a good orgasm, as a regular orgasm, or is it I should say regular, is it an ejaculatory orgasm? So
Right.
I know you said that, like, it's really, one of the things you said is it really helped you show up differently as a man. So tell us a little bit about your journey, like prior to even learning what you're going to teach and talk about today, prior to even writing this great book that we're going to talk about today that you just published and released. Prior to any of this, how did you even begin to even learn about this concept? And what was your process to say, yes, this is important to me. I've got to learn how to do this.
Yeah, great. So my path is I was a pretty average guy. I had a corporate job. Sex was something that I cared about, but wasn't particularly good at. I didn't really have a bunch of tools or support. Kind of average. I struggled with a lot of shame from my Catholic upbringing. I had a little bit of sexual trauma in my past. So anyway, I took a gap year off from my job and I went traveling and volunteering around Asia. And randomly, my partner and I ended up at a Tantra retreat in Thailand. We didn't know anything about it. We just showed up and we were really struggling with our sex life. We were not meeting each other. We were trying. It was like butting heads and crisis mode, to the point where we thought we were going to break up. And then we roll into this retreat, and here are all these humans who are investing in their sexuality. There's all these tools and practices, and there's a whole different framework than what I grew up with. The idea that our sexuality is sacred and that these bodies are holy, and that we want to welcome our desires as part of our life force energy that flows through us. And all of this for me, like a decade ago, was just like click, click, click. Wow, wow. And most importantly, it was like, okay, I'm going to take these practices and I'm going to start using them. And one of my challenges was I wouldn't last very long in sex. I would last 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And so they were like, well, slow down, breathe, feel your body. And the first time very simple. And the first time we tried this, I had sex with my partner for 45 minutes and both of us were crying at the end. We were like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And for me, it was a reorientation around sex just being what my body did to starting to have some sovereign choice around how I show up sexually. So that's where I got my start. And then I was enrolled, and I was like, they were teaching yoga. Oh, yoga is not just a stretching fad. It's actually like a practice that will support me to have better sex. Sweet, I'm in. That's awesome. And then my partner and I started having a daily sexual practice where we really focused. We had the time and space in our lives to go deep with each other. And in making it a practice, I was able to retrain my arousal response, my nervous system, and my whole body. And we talk about orgasm being energy. At the beginning, I was like, I don't get energy. I'm a mathematician. That was what my college degree was. I don't understand energy because you can't measure it. Slowly, I started to feel energy in my body, and it was like, whoa, this is a real thing. And I can start to work with it. And wow, some really awesome results happen. Not only for my partner, she was like stoked, but also for me. So much started to unlock in my body. So that's what got me on the path. And then that passion has just carried forward. Once I learned it, I was like, okay, people need to know about this.
I love it. And I love the experience of, just like the experiencing energy for the first time. One of my doctorates is in acupuncture and oriental medicine. So while I have studied a little Tantra, not a lot, I'm definitely not a like deep Tantra person. I've studied Qigong for couple decades, which is, a different version of movement of energy. And that first time I remember feeling like truly how I would define it, at least after all these years of study, and like realize it's real, right? Realize this thing that we can't actually see, right, is actually very real, and that we can utilize this to help ourselves feel better, to feel more relaxed, or to feel more energized, and then to tie that into sex. I think these types of processes really show us the innate capacity of the human body to not only heal, but to like show up present, fully present. I think we go through like when I'm listening to your story, it's making me think that like the way we go through sex, right, as humans so many times is just this almost like unilateral, I'm in this one zone. This is my zone. And I stay in my zone, and that's what I do. And your story is like opening up so much around like the capacity of the human to experience so many more sensations and so much more pleasure if we start opening out like our zone or approach beyond this like very linear direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the places where I love to start this conversation is around orgasm versus ejaculation. Like
sure, let's do it.
The very beginning is orgasm for me is the pleasurable sensations that I'm having in my body. And I would say it's a subtle energy sensation. And then ejaculation is the biological process, the physiological process of pumping sperm out of the penis. And in all of the porn that I ever watched growing up, in all of the pop culture, in every conversation I ever had, it was just assumed that they went together. That was one phenomenon. Right. And so the first step is just to like conceptually be like, okay, I can have this energetic peak of pleasure that does not have to have anything to do with my cock rhythmically pumping and ejecting fluid. That we want to learn how to split those. And then once I get the energetic peak, I can have those again and again and again. The same way, similar to how women's arousal can work, where women can have orgasm after orgasm. Men, we can learn this too. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. The multi-orgasmic man.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, beautiful. So then from that standpoint, so now we've like helped people understand this, right? Now we've helped people understand that this is not necessarily one and the same, that are these two separate processes. I think probably one of the things that comes up probably commonly for men, right, is, well, how do I control that, right? How do I begin, like, once I like start feeling pleasure, how do I begin to control this? And I know you and I talked offline about the concept of edging, right? And that being one of the ways potentially to control this, to say, hey, I'm going to feel pleasure, but not actually take it all the way to like ejaculation. But that still doesn't, tell me, and like where, from a standpoint of control, how do I prevent, or how does a man prevent actually going all the way to ejaculation and just experiencing the pleasure and the subtle sensations that orgasm allows?
That's such a great question. And in my book, I lay out 5 steps to orgasmic mastery. And the first step is arousal control. I don't know if you know that, but control is like where we begin. So I start everybody who I work with, and for me personally, the last decade I've been doing this, I have a daily self-pleasure practice. And that self-pleasure practice is my opportunity to feel pleasure in my body, to give the opportunity for arousal to be here and orgasm to be here, but it's not a goal-oriented practice. It's just I'm breathing deeply, connecting with my body every day.
And this is a solo practice, correct?
Solo practice for me to be with me. And then whatever yummy goodness, if I have a partner right now, I have a partner, I get to bring that to her. But it's really about cultivating it in myself. So the first step, arousal control for my process, if you could imagine a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is no arousal and 10 is peak orgasm. We want to find 5 to 7 on the arousal range. So 5 is high enough that you're not going to slip into not being aroused anymore. 7 is far enough below the top that there's a safe buffer in case there's a wave and you don't spill over. So for most of us, like the 5 to 7 range, we call it flyover territory. We just want to cruise right past that to get to the yummier stuff.
Feeling yummy. We want it to feel yummier.
Right? But actually, there's a really rich playground in the 5 to 7 range. And then learning how to hang out there. And if you can hang out there, I've tested this, you can go hours being aroused and just be in that zone, right? So when I was growing up, I was watching porn and I was kind of like quiet. I didn't want to get caught. And so I would masturbate as quickly as possible. And I was training my body, my arousal system, my nervous system to get erect and then come quickly and then be done, right?
Yeah.
We want to retrain that pattern. Not everybody has that, but we want to retrain it so we can hang out aroused for as long as we want. So that's like the first practice, is just touch your body, breathe deeply, feel pleasure, hang out in that 5 to 7 band.
So a couple of questions from that. So one, do you feel then, when we're talking about, say, this pleasure practice, right? And we're talking about masturbation, do you feel then that people, and I think this is a common practice, right, where people's masturbation practice looks generally the same? Like, usually from what I've seen in studies, women tend to have their range of a few different ways they masturbate, but it's like in this narrow range, and men often too. And so, and it does, typically look for people with masturbation, most commonly, it's to get the orgasm job done, right? It's like, we're here for a mission, and it's very, very short. So do you feel then, with what you've seen in your research and your work, that when we are masturbating in this way, are we then setting ourselves up where this like arousal length, it's like harder to achieve that arousal length with a partner?
Completely. So if I only touch myself one specific way for my pleasure, and then if my partner doesn't touch me in that one specific way, I may not get aroused. And I've spoken to, like, I've had this experience myself personally, but I've also coached other men where they're like, I have erectile dysfunction. Well, in what cases, with your partner, but on your own, you don't. And so you're touching yourself in one way, but your partner's not doing that. There's the disconnect right there. So in your self-pleasure practice, expand your range. We are capable of so many different flavors of pleasure, from the lightest little tickling, teasing touch to like rough grabbing to scratching and pulling. Get into the full expression of what your body can do. And that's going to allow you to bring that into your lovemaking with your partner. Completely agree.
Okay. So my second question, so that clears that up. Then my second question for you is, when we're thinking about this scale, right? This 10-point scale. And we're saying 5 to 7 is kind of this really lovely zone that gets passed over. I've seen situations where it's helpful, and I'm like, almost all situations, I feel like communication is really important. But I've seen situations where couples have experimented with things such as saying like, okay, I'm at a 5, I'm at a 7. Like, do you bring in and some of the work that you do, like with partner play, like with this scale where a partner can be like, okay, this is where I'm at, here's where I'm at on the scale, and then utilize that to almost inform the partner so that it becomes less of a, say unilateral process where, like, say the man is holding his pleasure in the 5 to 7 and more of a combined process that we get to experience together where they're getting feedback, and maybe the woman's even changing what she's doing to help hold him in the 5 to 7. Is that part of it as well?
Completely. I'm so happy that you're speaking to this point. Communication. So if you decide to take this practice on, it's a big undertaking as a guy for most of us. It takes a lot of discipline, a lot of control, and a lot of practice. If you have a partner, you need to tell your partner, hey, I want to learn this thing. And you need to enroll your partner in this process together with you. You both have to be on the same page. And there's going to be a phase of like kind of learning how to drive a stick shift vehicle for the first time, where we're rewiring everything. Like, oh, well, stop. Okay, now go. Oh, all right. And so it can be a little bit awkward to stay in that zone. If your partner doesn't know that you're trying to do this, it can be hurtful for your part, like emotionally hurtful, or your partner may not feel your full energy coming in the same way. And so, yeah, it's essential in my book to have that conversation. And then if your partner is on board to be like, yeah, I want to like play in this zone with you and I want to learn this practice with you, then great. That is actually the key to success.
Okay, so this is really exciting. And I think one of the things that I can feel that people might be thinking about, right? Because it's so common to hear this and be like, well, this sounds great. This sounds like I could provide more pleasure for my partner and I could last longer. I think those are probably conclusions people are already getting from our conversation. That being said, I know there's so many other benefits. And I find that as humans, most of the time when we know that, like, what the benefits are and what the purpose is and all of the purposes, it can become a higher level of interesting to say, yeah, this is, like you said, this is a practice. This will take time. So I think going through and understanding some more of the benefits could really help people understand, like, oh yeah, this is actually, worth it for them and for their, their partner to put this energy into it, because it is a process. So tell us a little bit more about, like, since, you've been doing this, since you've coached others in this, what have you seen from a benefit standpoint?
Right. Okay. So first little tidbit, a very interesting data point. A few years back, I got interested in talking to women whose partners had learned this skill. And I was like, what's the best part of your man having this practice? And I was surprised, but then it made complete sense that almost unilaterally what I heard back is there's no more agenda around ejaculation during sex. There's not that pressure to have the goal. Right.
Yeah.
Right?
And I talk about that a lot in my work too, around, like, we got to take this goal off the table. This goalpost really brings us out of the present moment. But I hadn't thought about that in terms of this non-ejaculatory orgasm, that completely changes that whole mindset from that standpoint.
Completely changes it. Right. So that's the feedback I got from partners on the other side of it. I've talked to many, many men who have gone through this initiation, and this is true for me. The biggest thing was actually that I wasn't expelling my life force through my semen. And that gave me an incredible amount of energy and focus. It was like this fog lifted from my system, and I could see clearly, and I would wake up every morning and I would know what to do, and I would go do it. And when I'm ejaculating, there's an amount of life force energy that gets given away that then my body has to replenish. Yeah. And because I started masturbating when I was in 5th grade, however, 12 years old, something like that, I had no baseline. And I would masturbate once a day for all the way through to my late 20s. So I did not know what this was costing me. And then once I stopped, it was actually like, oh, wow, how do I even deal with all of the energy that I now have available, the vitality that's flowing through my system? And this is like how our bodies naturally operate when we're not expending that energy.
Yeah, and in Chinese medicine, we call that Jing. I imagine
Sure.
Jing as the term. So life force, and we talk a lot about that, right? That there's a certain like essence that we come into this world with, and there's almost this lack of ability to, say, regenerate some level of this, especially for men, according to some of the theories. So my question for you is this, because another thing that I've seen when men, and I'll bring up my partner here, is that there's certain times where it's like there can be all of this energy and this intensity. My partner is a really, really amazingly, like, he's masculinely intense in like the best way. And sometimes when he is like working really hard and pushing real hard, this intensity kind of like builds up, and he's really good at holding it in. And the process of ejaculation, and he knows how to edge, and he knows how to do also, we can have these long, like 3-hour lovemaking sessions. So he's gotten that down, but this process of this not ejaculating, like what I think about him is like, after in these times where it's like, oh my gosh, like just needing that release and needing to almost like take, say, some of that yang energy down and to ground it. It's really healing for him, the ejaculation process. So, so I wanted to bring that into this conversation around. So the question is then, like, do you find then with these non-ejaculatory orgasms, like there's still like really important health benefits to the orgasm itself? And if so, then where are you seeing the timing is like, or the reasons to say, hey, this time I'm going to do these practices, do my arousal lengthening practice, do all these different things, the 5-step process of your book to at least get to that pleasure zone so it lasts longer, so I can have a longer lovemaking session. So where do you see it's like, okay, we have a longer lovemaking session, and it's going to be time to orgasm without ejaculating, versus, hey, now is actually a really good time to orgasm with ejaculating. You understand that question?
I completely understand the question. So the idea with these practices, the phrase I like to use is ejaculatory choice. So rather than the ejaculation being the unconscious drive for me into sex, and then it's kind of owning my behavior, I get to be really consciously and intentional in how I do that. As I've talked to men, I've been astounded by how different, how unique each person's sexual system is. So I share, these are the practices that worked for me, and I invite men to be a scientist with their body and their system to explore.
Yeah, I love that phrase.
Yeah, totally. So I have gone over a year without ejaculating. And to be specific here, it's not I wasn't sexual. It was I was in my self-pleasure practice, and I was connecting with other people. So I was stimulating my arousal the whole time and not ejaculating. And I went over a year. My body felt great. There's an adjustment period. I've also been in a period where once a month, when my partner was on her moon, I would share my semen. And it was a beautiful, like deep, like shamanic, powerful ceremony that we did. And it would cost me something. I would feel like, okay, I'm giving my life force and I'm dedicating it into my relationship here. So there's not a right, there's not a wrong. It's feel into where this lands for you and try a bunch of different things. There's one other piece that I want to share here, which is important for me. I have looked at the academic research around prostate health, and as far as I can tell, there's not a consensus around ejaculatory frequency with prostate health. Some articles say, yes, you should ejaculate more and clean out the system. Other articles say, no, it doesn't make a difference. And so I haven't been able to find any consensus on this. And without that consensus, it's just stay with what feels right for your body.
Yeah, sadly, I think there's so many things in the sexual health world that we just don't have the number of studies we need and the clarity on these studies to really form a consensus. And I do agree that with any of these things, it's like we have to follow our own body and our own feeling. So it sounds like for your own personal experience, when you actually, after going this period and not ejaculating and then coming back and deciding that you were going to ejaculate just in this very, very special, sweet moment with your partner when she was on her moon. So in this scenario, like, does she, like, I'm curious, and if it's as too like personal for her, I want to, obviously respect her space.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, if she's shared with you, and this feels appropriate to share, when she, like, if she has like noticed anything different from her experience, saying like, okay, this has not happened, and then this one sacred time a month that this is going to be the way that you guys share this energy. Has she noticed anything in particular there?
So this was a few years ago with a former partner, and what I can share is that it was really powerful for both of us. Like when we were doing it, it's vulnerable and meaningful, and there's like some alchemy that happens on the body substance level when we connected in that way. And for me, it took my bond deeper with her. Yeah, it was amazing. And offering, it's not just offering my seed, I'm offering my life force, and I'm dedicating it into the connection of our relationship. And that's just like melts my heart. It's such a beautiful way to be in devotion.
Yeah, there's so much, I think spiritual, mental, emotional, and obviously physical, but it's like it brings a level of closeness that is way, way more than just like one level of closeness.
Totally.
No.
I've also done a practice of offering, like going outside into nature and offering my seed to the land. And that's a super cool way to connect with the natural world. And we our culture, we suffer from a disconnection from nature, and that practice really brought me in deep. So it opened the door for more ways for me to be intentional with my body and my sexuality, which has been pretty cool.
Yeah, I've known quite a few females over the years that have done that with their menstrual blood. So it's and that can be oftentimes in the feminine a way of creating like ceremony and connection and just kind of recentering with the earth and any intentions, and just creating that almost more alignment with nature and the world around us. And I think it's like, in Chinese medicine, we talk a lot about like the microcosm and the macrocosm, and that the macrocosm's nature and the world and all these things around us, and that the same types of energy that we see in the wood growing strong in the earth, and the way the rivers cut through the forest, and all these things, that the movement and the energy behind these things we actually have in our body. So I think those kind of practices bring us back to, the.
Absolutely. I agree. I want to circle back around to the benefits, because I said one of the benefits for men when you get this is you have more focus and energy, but also the sex levels up in ways that I could not have comprehended. Having orgasm after orgasm after orgasm is super cool. Getting into extended rolling orgasmic states, having the orgasm move through different energy centers in the body, in particular when you bring it to the crown, there's like profound mystical experiences that can open up through this. And it was eye-opening for me in terms of my spiritual path. Like, wow, this is available to me. This is the second book in the series. So these are workbooks on masculinity, and they correspond to different archetypes. So the first book was called The Organic Masculine, and it's on the archetype of the magician. This book just published, and it's on the archetype of the warrior. It's a big book. It covers a lot of information. As I was going through what I wanted to share and where it belonged in which book, at first I put the non-ejaculatory orgasm practice in The Lover, which will be my next book. And then I realized that it was actually my warrior, with my dedication and my focus, who taught me how to get this practice. And then The Lover was more of my relational realm. So the job of the warrior is to integrate our primal drives. And in this book, I talk about violence and aggression, and then sexuality. We want to integrate those so that we can choose how to use them in our lives for good. And that's the core component. So I spend a good chunk of time giving all of the yoga, meditation, breath work, self-pleasure practices for non-ejaculatory orgasm. And then I do a whole other exploration around male violence. And why is it that men are causing most of the violence in the world today? And what can we do about that?
Thank you for listening to the Libido Lounge. Please don't keep me a secret. Please share this with your friends. You can find me on YouTube, on Instagram, as well as how to work with me at mylibidodoc.com.